I'm just going to go on now to summarise some of the things we're looking at as we move forward, what we have in the pipeline for the future. So Annette, do you mind sharing your screen again? And please do keep the questions coming in. Jim and Tammy, I'm not going to be keeping tabs on that for the next few minutes, so please you can pick them up if you can. Okay, thank you. So I think it's Mike's touched on all this, but I think it's useful just to remind ourselves of our mission. Energy4All was set up by Baywind in 2002, and the mission that Baywind gave Energy4All was as shown there. And we're very much a cooperative of co-ops, and cooperative values and principles are extremely relevant to what we're trying to achieve, and we very much work hard to adhere to those values and principles. And it's this cooperation amongst the 28 co-ops that we now have, and new ones that will come in the future, that helps us to deliver on this mission. And I think it's also interesting to note that, as well as from my point of view, I see this as twofold. As well as trying to deliver on low carbon energy, I think we're also trying to work in a better, fairer way. As we've been hearing over the past months, we need a fairer future. We need a different approach to business in that fairer future. And I think the cooperative model gives good expression to one of the fairer ways we might work. So we feel very passionate about delivering sustainable energy, but doing it in a way that shares the benefit and involves people as much as possible in that process. So that's important to us. Next slide, please. That's a very brief glance at the office, which I think Mike showed earlier. It's an old photo. We're not seeing as many people in the office these days.
I was going to say, it's pretty much empty at the moment.
Yeah, that's right.
Due to COVID.
But I think the point I wanted to make is that delivery of the mission that we have takes a considerable amount of work. It runs against the status quo. We're in a sector that is very difficult, and yet we've achieved a lot because of your support, but because of the dedication and commitment of the staff that we have. And just to show with the next slide, whilst I'll talk about new projects, and some of us are running around trying to find new projects and engaging with new things, it's important to realise that in the background there, Mike's already thanked the office staff, but we need to recognise some of the activities listed there that are needed to keep these co-ops moving, to keep the projects running successfully, and also on top of that to support our efforts to try and find new projects and bring those along. And so it's once again I just wanted to acknowledge the fantastic work that the staff do, and under particularly difficult circumstances this year. Just moving on to the outlook that we have. What I want to talk about is these four things. What we want to do at Energy4All is, in support of the existing co-ops and in finding new projects, is to continue to be pioneering, to continue to demonstrate that community energy works, and by that we want to support projects for the long term. I think that's a unique feature of Energy4All. When we partner with a project, we want to be there for the long term, and we're looking to improve our administration and asset management services that we provide to those co-ops. We want to support co-ops to develop the existing co-ops, and also to promote cooperation amongst that family of co-ops that we've brought together. So I'll look at these areas individually. If you could move us on, please. So pioneering is about trying to find new projects, maybe to work in new areas, to look at how we can overcome the changes that are happening in the sector. And we often worry that there's going to be a lull in what is in the pipeline. The feed-in tariff came to an end, is coming to an end. What will we do when the feed-in tariffs run out? But it does seem that the projects are out there, and as we saw with the fundraising successes that we've had last year, the appetite is there to support this kind of work. So with that in mind, we try to build and move forward. The photos show one of the more recent hydro project installs at Acclaim. We've got new hydro projects that we are potentially going to be working with in the near future. Highland Community Energy Society will be running a share offer very soon to bring on new projects. And the other photo there, the aerial view, is of the James Hutton Institute, where we're working on a 2 megawatt ground mount solar project, which will be behind the meter for the Institute there. So there are some exciting things already in the pipeline and quite well advanced in their development. Mike touched on heat, and we'll talk more about that later. We have involvement now in a number of heat projects, one major ground source heat project, and also some smaller village-based community groups looking at ground source heat. And of course, we've asked the question of the membership about the Inverurie project, which is an energy from waste project in Inverurie in Scotland, and we're very excited to be involved and closely involved with Inverurie Community Energy to help bring that project forward. Quite excitingly, this year we've had contact from an offshore wind developer. We've not had any community involvement in offshore wind. We're not aware of community ownership in an offshore wind context. So we're looking to try and work in partnership with the offshore wind developer that has approached us, and that's early days, but there are things moving forward there. And we have a reasonable stream of tenders where we're looking at working with warehousing and distribution organisations looking at solar on their roofs. These are quite large scale projects, which we hope some of which will come through. It is back to the kissing frogs. Some of them won't come through, but we hope that some of those will become successes. We're also seeing the water companies look at their portfolio of sites, and we're involved in at least 2 of the water companies' efforts to review their portfolio and to see how they might deliver renewable energy on their land holdings with some form of community ownership involved. And we're starting to see the beginnings of wind energy developers looking at the UK again, looking to the future, looking at developing larger sites, particularly in Scotland, making inquiries of Energy4All, interested in how they might replicate something like the Falk model on the new sites that they will be bringing forward. And of course, there's lots of activity, discussion around new business models, and we keep a close eye on how we might be involved in new innovations in the market. In particular, for example, selling energy back to the co-op members. That's an area of work that we're pursuing fairly actively to see what can be delivered in that sort of space. And then I think on to the next slide, please, Annette. As I mentioned, Highland Community Energy Society will be looking at a new share offer in the coming months and during the course of next year. These other projects are looking towards share offers imminently, really, in the next few months. Dundee Solar, we would expect and hope that in 2021 there will be a share offer for the solar farm there if all things go according to plan, which is not always the case, it has to be said. Just moving on, please.
Sorry, can I just say Edinburgh share offer is going to launch on Monday.
Thank you. You can say that. We're trying to make sure that community energy works, and some of that comes down to Mike's point earlier that we have to be selective in where we apply our resources. So we are trying to become better at our financial modelling and at making good early decisions about where we deploy our resources, given we have limited resources, so that we try and support projects which have a reasonable chance of delivery. We're also looking, as I mentioned, to support the existing co-ops to make sure that they continue to deliver their energy generation successfully and have the opportunity to develop based on a solid initial energy generation project. And we're looking at supporting those co-ops through, for example, the new accounts packs, and through dealing with issues that have arisen, like with the co-op to Octopus Energy transition, supporting the co-ops through all those issues around metering and billing, and making sure the money comes into the co-ops to enable them to function effectively. We're looking at reviewing our monitoring and asset management provision to the co-ops, and how we deal with health and safety, which now we've grown to 28 co-ops, needs a review at this point. Just some of the photos there, the metering and billing side is represented by the top left photo, but some of the operational issues that we end up being involved with are shown there. Two transformer replacements that I'm aware of at High Winds on the right, and the one mentioned at West Solent that Kathy's been looking after. And then things we weren't expecting, a break-in recently at one of the Four Winds sites, the substation break-in that we had over the past couple of weeks. And as Annette booked her day off, the substation break-in came in, so that day off was cancelled as she got involved in dealing with sorting that site out. So there's a lot going on in the background to make sure that, as I say, that community energy works. And part of that also is our recruitment. We're looking for new member staff in the southeast, and I know the office are looking for new staff to continue strengthening the support that we can give to the co-ops. On to the next slide, please. And in terms of support that we try to provide for developing existing co-ops, we want to try and consolidate this into our Beyond Generation project. Natasha Hoare did some research work recently over which we reported on at the last AGM. We've been stalled in trying to recruit a co-op development officer because of trying to begin that process in February, March this year. So we kind of backed off from doing that, as we feel there's a role for somebody to be out meeting with co-ops, looking at how they might promote education, use their community funds better, increase their engagement with the local community. So we are in the process of trying to plan for that role to start to take some shape. And developing the development of existing co-ops means, in a simplest sense, adding additional roofs to solar projects. It sounds simple. It's obviously quite complicated to do, but that's one of the ways that co-ops are developing. But there are other issues. Some co-ops are looking at planning extensions for their existing projects and what that might mean for other projects they can bring on board. Some are looking at storage. We've got a limited experience of storage with Repower Balcombe, who have installed the batteries shown to the top right there at Turner's Hill School. So that's building up some of the experience we need in terms of battery storage. And as I've mentioned, we're looking at energy sales to members, how that might work. And importantly, how we might refresh the membership of co-ops, how we might bring in new members to your co-ops to keep bringing in new ideas and new energy to help with their development. There are a couple of shots there at the bottom of how community funds have been used. So there's a composting toilet opening ceremony that you can see on the right-hand side. Eddie will be pleased I put that photo up. And we supported through Reading Community Energy Society an off-grid solar installation at a kind of gardening project that applied for community funds to Reading Community Energy Society. And we hope to continue to keep an eye on how we as Energy4All and how our co-ops respond to the co-op values and principles, and to try and make that a more intentional assessment of how we're doing against those values and principles. Thanks, Annette. Next slide, please. So, back to the point I made earlier, we are a cooperative and we are a co-op of cooperatives, and we cooperate to meet and deliver on the points I've listed there. And I think to get to the point we've got to, we've needed that cooperation to overcome the difficulties, to encourage each other, and we very much hope that you can be encouraged to continue with that process in supporting each other and the mission that Energy4All has been set to deliver on. And that brings me to the final point. You know, we're happy to take more questions, but it is your cooperative. Energy4All is your cooperative. If you could just jump to the last slide. So your views are very much welcome. They're some of the things we're thinking of. What do you have on your minds? What should we be prioritising? How do you see the community energy sector evolving, and there, if you've got things you want to bring to our attention, then we'd be pleased to hear from you. Thank you. So I've galloped through there. We've got 15 minutes before we close for a break, before we have our speaker at 11. So maybe there are questions, maybe you want to have a longer break, and maybe there are comments you want to raise. I'll leave it open to the floor, and hopefully Jim and Tammy can raise any points that I've missed. Thank you.
Just a couple of comments, John, rather than questions so far. There's Paul is saying earlier someone mentioned the lack of bank funding. There is a collective organisation actively promoting locally based ethical cooperative banking, Community Savings Banks Association. One such bank is Avon Mutual, serving the West Country. Do you have any comment to make on that, John? Or
I can comment on that because I live in the West Country, and I'm aware that Jules Peck and the work that he's doing on the Avon Mutuals project, it did cross my mind. I think they're at a relatively early stage, but I'd be happy to hear that they were further along the track. But they are progressing well and looking to capitalise further, I think, as we speak almost. So there may be opportunities to talk to organisations like that, and it's certainly one that I will follow up with. In particular, I'm aware of that one, but if there are others, we should try and pick up on those conversations. And
then Anthony says the best way to get new members is to develop more projects, which I think we would agree with. Josh Brown, I think dynamic management of assets will be important and something that Energy4All should look to offer. I'm thinking of the ODFM process issued by NG, where sites can turn up or turn down and be paid for doing so. Yeah. And a final comment, Julia, or final for now. I would love an answer to my earlier question on providing mentoring to share all the skills acquired by various co-ops. Sorry, I think we missed that.
I actually, Julia, apologies, because I've made a note of that and was going to include it in my presentation. But I'll answer that now. I think you're absolutely right, and I think I would see the co-op development beyond generation role as including that sharing of skills and mentoring across the co-ops. I think we have done that to a degree because we've had people like Rod Blunden and other volunteers who've stepped forward with skills, having joined one co-op, and have then gone on to support co-ops who are looking to develop projects. In particular, Rod's worked on wind energy development and has supported boards very actively. So where we're aware of specific skills that we can transfer across co-ops, we've been successful in doing that. I think there's a broader point to your question, which is how do we do that more generally? How do people perhaps, who do people communicate with to offer skills, or where do people turn if they think they need skills? And I think that's something that we would like to look at and are starting to work on through the Beyond Generation efforts that we're beginning to make. I think grants, so hopefully that's a start to that answer, Julia, but please keep in touch. I'd be happy to discuss that further. And then Grant has raised a challenge, and this is for the whole board. So I think we were tech leaders in wind, everyone else caught up. We like that, Grant, thank you. Should we be less risk averse and look to evolving tech? I'm opening that to my fellow directors, or maybe to Tom as well, one of my colleagues. I don't think we would shy away from that, because we're looking at ground source heat pumps, for example, which are not new tech necessarily, but how we fund that, how we build that into a community-owned organisation could be challenging. But I think we're very actively engaged in that in terms of new tech. Battery storage, we continue to review, and where project opportunities arise, we try and engage there. But it is a challenging area, and we do have to think about how we not so much protect members' interests, but be a realistic and engage people in things that are for which they're fully aware of the risks. I think that's how we have to start to deal with those new tech issues. Any other comments on that?
There's also timing as well. You know, it's finding the time to look into these, you know, new technologies and will they work. Whereas at the moment, especially over the last 2 years, we have been very concentrating on expanding the existing co-ops, which again I think is important because it brings us back to the point, well, expand and you bring more new members in.
There's a comment from Tony. John, really pleased we are looking beyond solar, wind and hydro, especially relevant to those locations that don't have access to wind or hydro. When will we have sight of the business models for these renewables?
John, you invited me to comment on that emerging tech thing, so I'll take the opportunity. I think the fact that we've got a guest speaker coming along to speak about district heating in the Danish context speaks directly to that, and thinking about the cutting edge technology when Bay Wind was established was perhaps not a long bow to draw to say that was also an import from Denmark at the time. So perhaps it's a case of history repeating itself. I think the point is that we're very much continuing the discussion about heat as one of those potential technology innovations.
Bay Wind, it was Swedish technology that came over, and they took a real risk coming to the UK, but they made it work. But it was slow progress to start with, but we got there in the end.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, new technologies, you know, you will get people putting the money in for, yes, altruistic reasons, and they want to see new technologies and new projects progress. But a lot of people, they put the money in, they don't want to lose it. You know, they want to make this work and make a return on their investment. So we've got to bear that in mind as well.
I would add one of the areas, it's not so much technology, but it's just doing things in a very different way that we've spent quite a lot of time looking at, has been on microgrids, and either with big blocks of flats or with housing estates, generally new housing estates. There's a lot of benefit, and they're really made for community energy as well, if we can get them up and going, because you can then sort of share the generation within lots of households, not just those who've got access, say, to solar on the roof. Batteries at that sort of tier, at a community level battery, is in many ways the best size to have. It's much more cost effective than an individual one, but it's not feeding into the central grid. It's dealing with local issues. But so far that they have been frogs that we have kissed, but have not yet turned into princes. We'll carry on searching for that, because I think to get a community-owned microgrid at scale up and going would be very, very worthwhile indeed. It's something which Findhorn has done, but the idea is to make that more replicable, and because their circumstances were fairly unique by being a village based in a former caravan park which already had its own microgrid.
We also need to look at, you know, try and lobby the planning on new housing. You've got lots of new housing estates going up, and there's not one solar panel, or you can buy solar built into roof tiles now, but you don't see any of that. They now build sites with lots of public areas, but they could use that for, you know, ground source heat pumps, but you don't see any renewables in the new sites. It's all down to gas and electric again. Yes, they're getting very good at conserving energy within the home, but we're not taking advantage of the renewable technologies that are out there.
I think in terms of Tony's question about when will we see business models for these new technologies, we're at a stage where everything's relatively bespoke, Tony, so that, you know, there's not a template heat model. But in terms of as these things develop, you know, we obviously would be in a position to share models with if that is relevant to the opportunity that comes up.
Yeah, I mean, we have evolved. We used to be just wind, and we've now moved on to solar and hydro and wood heat. And it'd be nice if we could move into the heating side as well, renewable heat incentive.
And I think that there are useful comments in the chat around the practitioners forum at Community Energy England as a way of sharing knowledge. And Philip from Community Energy England, thank you, is suggesting that those affiliated with Energy4All co-ops could join that that forum. So that's, I guess, Philip's suggesting that we get in touch with Community Energy England, and the details are there in the chat. There's some political comments coming through on Boris and blaming the government. I'm reluctant to start that unless any of my colleagues want to pick up on that with one comment before I close. But is there anything more, Jim, that we need to pick up on there, do you think?
One at the bottom from Rob, there is a big push towards air source heat pumps at household level, with Green Homes grant opening at the end of this month, but not at whole community level. Yeah, it's a comment rather than a question.
Yeah.
No, but it's an area we could, you know, if we know this information, we could push this out to the whole of our membership. And I think that's where we could improve communication with members on a more regular basis. But again, it's down to timing. You know, we're busy building new projects, and sometimes we forget to keep the members up to speed with what's going on out there.
Could I say, I mean, it's Mark Bluntly at Westmill Wind and Solar. There's a couple of things. So the wind and solar are looking with the low carbon hub at the viability of an energy storage project at Westmill. Westmill's unusual because it has a wind project that generates a lot of power in the winter, and solar that generates it in the summer. So that's quite an interesting thing. I think our thinking has been that we want to do something that's not just technically right, but actually also builds on the fact that these are community-owned assets. So it's something that actually works for members and builds on the strength of members working together. And we are also working quite hard at thinking about how we actually interact with our members of the two co-ops. And you know, should all of our return be simply done through a return on investment, or can we actually sell our electricity to our members, and can we have a more direct relationship? So we're working quite hard on that. And I'd also just put a final plug in to ResCoop. ResCoop also, as well as Community Energy England, which is some excellent forums, ResCoop also has a series of working groups, and you can see what's happening in other countries. There's a lot to be learned from seeing some of those groups there. So if you have a look at the ResCoop website, you can see some forums looking at some of these subjects.
Thank you, Mark. I think I'm going to draw this session to a close, and just to explain, well, just to say thank you for, yeah, that's been a steady stream of comments and questions. So thank you for that input, which has helped that discussion move forward very well. And I think there's probably more for us to read and digest in the chat box there. So we'll take that away with us. So thank you very much for your involvement. We are encouraging people to have a break from their screens for 15 minutes, and Eric has joined us. So welcome, Eric, but we will properly do that, Eric, when we come back at 11. So if everybody's, well, we're just going to pause proceedings now. We'll be back at 11 o'clock, and we will begin with, at that point, we'll have the presentation from Eric Christensen from Denmark.